Hi, folks, and welcome to the Meaningful Money Podcast. This is session number 393. This is the podcast dedicated to helping you put your finances in order. My name is Pete Matthew, and I'm going to share with you everything you need to know and everything you need to do to secure your financial future. I'm here to help you make sense of money. Here we are. Once again, great to have you with me. Thank you so much for joining me. This is an important episode of the podcast, I reckon. Today, I'm chatting with Ken Okorafor of The Humble Penny, one of my favorite UK personal finance YouTube channels and blogs. I reached out to Ken for input after the murder of George Floyd by police officers in the US and the global outcry that followed that. I knew that I would get honesty and articulate responses from Ken about what my response should be to all that sort of stuff. And I had a great conversation with him on the phone, and you'll find out from my conversation with Ken today just what a great communicator he is and just how helpful. Hopefully you'll get a sense of how helpful he's been to me. So more on that in just a second. As usual, after the main body of the show, I'll announce what we're going to be talking about next week. No reviews this week. I've got plenty I can draw from. I just haven't added any in this week. But I'm particularly going to be announcing what the next season of Meaningful Money will be, which starts in 2 weeks' time. As ever, though, before all of that, remember this podcast is brought to you with the continuing help of my friends at 7 Investment Management. They've been helping me out here on Meaningful Money for ages and ages and ages, since the spring of 2011, which is just amazing. So please check out what they're up to. They're at 7im.co.uk. That's the number 7im.co.uk. Go check them out. So, I confess to feeling a little bit lost in the whole surge of feeling and action in the early days of the Black Lives Matter movement following the death of George Floyd. As a creator with a platform, I felt a responsibility to use my voice positively, but I just really wasn't sure what to say. Worried about saying the wrong thing, worried about messing it up, but I didn't really want it to be about me at all. I didn't want it to be, in the grand scheme of things, who cares about my feelings and whether I get things wrong? I wanted really this to be about the bigger issues at stake, and I wanted to address it properly, really. I wanted to understand what difference my small voice might be able to make and how best to use that. So Ken Okorafor of The Humble Penny has really helped me, and I hope that you enjoy my conversation with him today. Definitely give him a follow and a sub on YouTube. He's crushing it over there on YouTube, so definitely check him out. I'll obviously make sure the links to the relevant sites and channels are in the show notes, and that's the only link you need to remember for today's episode, meaningfulmoney.tv/session393. meaningfulmoney.tv/session393. Here's my conversation with Ken. Well, it's my pleasure to welcome my friend Ken Okorafor of The Humble Penny to the Meaningful Money Podcast. Ken, how you doing, my friend? You okay?
I'm great. How you doing, Pete?
Yeah, that's good. You're coming through loud and clear. You coming to us from whereabouts are you based today?
I'm based in Kent, actually. So I'm at home recording this from our studio.
Yeah, you're doing some good work on YouTube, man. You're crushing it over there. So kudos. I'm a little bit envious of your subscriber numbers. So I'm coming up on your tail, hopefully, before too long.
We're just trying to be consistent. I think that's the main thing, really.
It really is. Yeah. So yeah. I think, obviously, I reached out to you in light of the murder of George Floyd and the fallout from that. We had a conversation on the phone, which was super helpful to me, and we figured let's not replicate it, but let's have a conversation on record, if you like. So I'm grateful for your time today, mate. Can you just, before we dive in, just give folks a bit of a backstory? So who you are, what it is you do now, and just a little bit about your story to this point, if that's okay.
Yeah, okay. So, hey guys. So my name's Ken. Today I run a platform called The Humble Penny, which most might know it as a YouTube channel as well as a blog. And we run a sister company called Financial Joy Academy. And that's what I do at the moment full time. But my background is that I'm a chartered accountant. I trained as an accountant, and I've worked in in finance, mostly in my role, working up to becoming a chief financial officer. But this year in April, I took the leave to focus fully on running the Humble Penny full time. But before that, before all of this stuff, my real thing, really, the other big part of my core identity is that I immigrated to the UK when I was 14 in 1998. I'm 36 at the minute. And that plays a big part of when I think about my life and my life's journey, that part of my story is a big part because it's taught me a lot about life, a lot about resilience, a lot about dealing with problems and navigating a lot of life's challenges, a lot of what we'll talk about today, really. So I was born in Lagos in Nigeria and moved here when I was 14 to begin my second life adventure. And that's what's brought me to where I am today.
Now, I imagine your experiences have been many and varied in that, because you've covered a lot of ground just in that sort of intro, really. But can you just give us some insight into your experience, obviously as a black man in pretty high-powered, you've been in board level situations, but also as a first-generation immigrant. I imagine you were, in many cases, the only black face in some of the work settings you found yourself in.
Yeah. So do you know what? This is such a huge topic for me because it's a subject that not a lot of people understand or even think about. I've had the life path of, I'm a black man. That's it. I was born where I was born. And the interesting thing that many people don't think about is where you are born in the world matters a lot, because it then dictates a lot of how your life outcome would be. So if you're born in America, you might not know it, but you've won the lottery. Born in the UK, you've also won the lottery in so many ways. So people might struggle to understand what I'm talking about there. But my journey has been very interesting because, when you move to a country and you are getting accustomed to culture, culture is a big thing, and you are struggling with identity. Yeah, identity being a big theme in my life. That creates a lot of challenges parallel to you being black, being immigrant, being all those other things, because you're in a new environment. So all through my journey, right from when I was 14, 15, I understood something, which is that I'm in an unequal society, and I've got to understand. I've got to find my way of devising my own advantage, finding my own advantage, in order for me to survive and potentially thrive in this unequal environment that I find myself in. So all through my career, as you guessed, I've been either the only black individual the company has ever hired, or the first that has made it to the point of an executive position, being able to sit in a boardroom and make board decisions. And in fact, I was having a chat with my wife before we came on this podcast. We're just reflecting. I was counted the last 5 places I've worked in the last 13 years. I was the only black male or black employee in those companies. These are companies, that are really large companies, but they'd never really come across someone like me who my approach had always been with my career to knock and kick at enough doors as possible to the point where someone will get so intrigued that they'd consider opening the door for me. Yeah, that had always been my approach. And that approach in some ways led me to become that person who would be that first individual for some reason, which then raises very interesting questions when you think about it. Why would I be the first individual of my kind in so many companies, unrelated companies in the UK? Why would that even be the case? Which I hope, we'll dive in a fair bit more into on this episode.
So can you use the word unequal a couple of times there. And I wonder if you can give some examples of that, because, you know, somebody in my position, you know, I'm a white middle class guy. I have obviously never experienced that. So I wonder, you know, if you can just give us an example or so of how that might be manifested.
Okay, so oh my God, this is such a big topic.
Yeah,
but when I when I think about this subject, as a black man or black individual in the UK, you are always living and approaching life from a place of defense. Yeah, so life, the minute you walk out of your door, you almost feel like you're walking into a possible battlefield. Okay. That battlefield manifests itself in different ways. Could be in your work environment. It could be that you just show up to, you know, your local Sainsbury's, and, you know, there's a possibility that something kicks off, and by default, there's an assumption that because you're black, you are at fault even before anything has even, like, any discussions have been had. And I've just, all through my journey, there's been this assumption, and it's an unwritten assumption, that as a black individual, I am below the white individual. Now, that might come from a historical context. You could argue that, you know what, that comes from, you know, you go back to slavery times, perhaps that's where that assumption comes from. But as a black man, and as you know, as a black person in the UK, and many other black people, you know, anyone you speak to, would always have this. There would always be this unwritten thing that exists. You can't really almost put your finger on, that exists whether it's in the job environment, whether it's you trying to get a pay rise, whether it's you trying to buy your first home. You just know that you're unable to do that because you're at a disadvantage. I'll give you an example. So as a black person in the UK, the fact that I immigrated here and started behind say a normal white person who is native and lives in this country, is born in this country, already puts me at a place of significant disadvantage. And so what you find when you look at the average black family, and it's almost a domino effect that happens, because everything, when you look at an average black family financially, for example, yeah, where they are financially is typically a function of many other dominoes, the things that haven't quite lined up in order for them to be where they ideally would like to be. So, for example, the fact that only, according to research, around 24% of black families own a home in this country, compared to, say, white families, which is between 53 and 58%. Okay, the fact that many those black families can't own a home, for example, is the result of other things, such as the fact that many of such families don't earn enough of an income to be able to consider home ownership a possibility. They then start to ask yourself, well, what does that mean? Why do they not earn as much income? Well, they don't earn as much income because the people who are hiring in jobs tend to hire people who look like them, you know, and every other person I've known who's hired me in every job I've been in has been a white male. And what you find is that most of the time people hire people who look like them, you know, and not necessarily because they are intentionally racist, but it's just a case of this is how it's always been, and this is kind of what we're used to. And I believe it's kind of referred to as it's a systematic thing that exists. And so that then carries on, and you can go as far back as, say, the educational system. You know, you go to schools and look at attainment and so on, or look at employment and look at the type of jobs that people do by ethnicity, and the fact that you get a lot more people from, you know, ethnic minority backgrounds, or black people doing jobs that are more support roles rather than roles in leadership or in roles where they are making some decisions. So all these various touch points essentially all point to an unequal society. And this is the challenge I face simply by my skin being black. This is the challenge my kids will face. They're born in Kent. They're born in the UK just like anybody else. But by virtue of having black skin, and by virtue of even being black boys, they're already segmented, right? And so already the battle lines have been drawn because the battle begins even now. We're already starting to think about how we educate them for them to realize that, there are, I hate to say it, and I'm sad to say it, but there are differences between my son Joshua and his other 7-year-old mates who are white in class. There'll be perceptions and judgments made, either by people who they meet or even by teachers, all through their lives.
I mean, how do you fight assumptions, though, Ken? I mean, I feel my heart sinking a little bit listening to you, because you talk about the domino effect, and obviously a lot of this goes back a long way, and there almost certainly won't be a single cause. It's a cumulative, compounding effect that has led society to be where it is right now. But clearly, at least my perception is that we're at some kind of breaking point or tipping point, as evidenced by the massive movement that came out of off the back of the murder of George Floyd, and of course Breonna Taylor, and the other things which are happening, which of course are just happening all the time, and yet seem to be particularly high profile. So I feel my heart sink, because you think, where on earth do we even start to find a way of putting something in the path of the dominoes so that we can start again almost, and that the domino effect does not continue anymore? Where do we start fixing this, man?
So I think trust is a big thing. Trust is a big factor. I think there's an inherent distrust for somebody with a skin color like I've got. Yeah. Whether it's in the workplace or whether it's even in, like, you go to a local supermarket and you see a black person walking down the aisle, or whether it's on the street. So trust is a thing, and that trust comes because we don't understand each other. We don't really, like, as a white man, Pete, or the other people listening to this podcast potentially, how many black people does the average white person know as a friend, or as a neighbor, or as a colleague, or as a, there's this gap that exists that's creating distrust in some ways. And I think what's happening now is that people are beginning to speak up and challenge what has been an ongoing suppression. Yeah. So, like, when the whole George Floyd thing happened, what it did for me was that I always felt, and I said this, I think I posted this on a blog post I put out, I literally cried that day. Yeah. On that day when we had Blackout Tuesday, because it felt as though a cap had been lifted. When you feel like you're always living your entire life, you always feel like you are a second-class citizen. You're always below, everybody else. What that did for me, this whole thing that's happening, is that it's just helped me and many other people like me to start to speak up and begin to ask ourselves, like, why are we in this situation we're in? And how can we start to build bridges? How can we start to change the many systematic things that exist ordinarily, and many of them unwritten, that are, kind of suppressing and causing, many black families to kind of just remain where they do not want to be. So I think it really begins with trust. I think having conversations about it, just like we're having now, without feeling awkward about it.
Yeah, sure.
Because there'll be many other people like you. And I've had this chat, I've got white friends, I've got Asian friends, I've got black friends. I've had people who, and there are very few of them, my white friends, who've called me and said during this period, like, how are you feeling, Ken, as a black man? Like, just tell me, like, what is your experience? So I think there is a form of education, first of all, around like what these challenges are that we face ordinarily, you know? And I think that education comes by us just talking about stuff and just having a dialogue, you know? Now there'll be bigger things that need to happen because we're fighting. There are bigger challenges from a systematic perspective that need to happen to make sure that, you know, that talented young black men and women are seen to be talented young black men and women, and they are given the opportunities to kind of explore being leaders in our companies, in our, you know, in our councils, in our society, in our communities, right? So I think it's a combination of us doing something, you know, things similar to what we're doing now, where we're just talking about it and not feeling awkward about it, right? And more structural things that need to be done. It's just ensure that, you know, the various inequalities that have existed and continue to exist even today just cease to exist over time.
Yeah. I mean, I absolutely agree. And probably of any time in history, the availability of mass media and the relative ease whereby significant movements can arise thanks to our interconnectedness, I think probably makes it quite likely that this, I hope, will gather momentum and continue. I've said several times on the podcast, I'm extremely optimistic about the next generation because, I mean, you got young kids. So Joshua is 7 and you've got another little boy, haven't you?
Yeah, it's 5, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So my girls are nearly 21 and 17 and a half, so a little bit older than yours. But I see how they consider the world through the lens very often of social media. So there's things we've got to be careful about there. But their general default acceptance of you know, folks from all planes of society, folks of every different color, every different gender identity, every different sexual identity, every different walk of life. I see their default acceptance of that as a very encouraging sign for the future. And yet it isn't going to fix in a generation. This is going to be, you know, a very long-standing thing. You say you've had conversations, and you know some white friends of yours have reached out and asked how you're doing. How have those conversations gone? The one thing I was really keen was that this wasn't about me, right? This wasn't about how I feel about this whole thing. It's irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. I just wanted to get it right, and I sort of felt the responsibility as somebody with a platform, however small relatively, to have a voice on this. So how have the conversations gone with your friends, and how do you see those conversations developing over time?
Do you know what? They've been very insightful. I've got one friend of mine. He is a white South African guy living in the UK, very successful, works in the banking industry, really super senior. And he called me up and we were just having a chat about just the Black experience. And during that call, after just spending some time just listening to me ordinarily, he said to me, Ken, do you know, I've come to realize that by speaking to you, I am actually racist.
Wow.
He just said it to me on the phone. He gave me an example. He said, one time he was in Canary Wharf by the bus stop, and a young black girl walked up to him who seemed to like him, thought he was a handsome guy. Started talking to him and at the end asked him, would you like to grab a cup of coffee or something? And he said no, and literally fobbed her off and walked away. And on that call with me, he said to me, Ken, this thing has haunted me for most of my life because I know that I said no because she's black, and I feared what other people would say if they saw me, a white man, with a black woman. The issue was not that he didn't think she was beautiful or anything like that. It was more the judgment and the society, the fear, the pressure from society because of the differences that existed.
Wow.
Right? And so he just admitted that. And I thought that was powerful for him to actually say that to me. Now, that didn't make me think any less of him as a friend. I give him more respect, in fact. So I thought, wow, you were able to actually identify a situation in your life where, you did something that you were not too proud of. Other conversations have gone very well in that some of the guys who I've spoken with have realized that it's not enough to say, I'm not racist. Yeah. But you can't be lukewarm. No. You can't just say, hey, look, there's something going over there and there's some other thing going over there. I'm just going to sit here. I know I'm okay, but I wouldn't say anything about it.
Yeah.
That's not enough.
No.
Right. What they've realized is that I've got to be anti-racist. I've got to actually speak up in some way. I've got to actually use my voice and say something. And this came out of conversations, just talking about it. And the weird thing was, we've never talked about race. Yeah, we've never talked about race. We talk about hey, let's meet up, let's go to the park, let's have some drinks, how's work, all these other things that we talk about, how the kids. But there's never a talk about race. And what some of the conversations help those guys to realize is that they have a certain privilege because they don't ever have to think about race. Whereas a black man or a black woman every day thinks about race. There's not a single day that I do not think about race. Yeah. Just now, I've just gone out before we had this podcast, went to the cafe with my wife, right? Just walking into anywhere, whether you walk into a cafe, you're always mindful that you are the only black man or black couple in the room. And the way you behave, the way you're seen, the way you project yourself is always being observed. Okay? And so that race thing is always with you every day. But with my fellow counterparts who are white, for example, that's never really something they think about at all. Of course, why would you? Why would you think about it? And so that remains an ongoing conversation. And I think it will be less of a conversation over time. The more people feel at home with each other, and the more people understand each other, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, man alive. That's easily been my biggest lesson in all this. So I was raised in Bradford in West Yorkshire, which certainly at the time, I don't know whether it still is, has the highest population per capita of minority Asian folks. So my middle school, so when I was 9 and 13, was 3/4 Asian kids. So I was raised in a multi-ethnic part of the country, and it was utterly normal. And obviously I was raised in the Christian faith, and so any kind of prejudice is, by definition, anathema to anybody who's raised, it's obviously not exclusive to the Christian faith, but, particularly, you love everybody. That's kind of a pretty fundamental tenet. And so when I sort of put out a bit of a plea for input on my mailing list, that I just mentioned that, and several people came back to say it is not enough just to be not racist. We have to be anti-racist, and it's like for the pendulum ever to be anywhere near the middle in a sort of equilibrium, it's way too far on the wrong side at the minute. It has to push past the middle first before it eventually comes back and we achieve some sense of equilibrium. That's why it's going to be so important to have positive, I don't know what the phrase is, but for instance, recruitment. It's so easy to say, well, no, I just recruit based on merit. It's like, well, you don't actually. You recruit people who look like you. And so we need to push the pendulum and say, no, we are going to actively recruit people of color for these positions or whatever, so that we eventually find the balance. And this has been a real learning curve for me, because you're right. I've never had to think about this stuff. And so if anything comes out of this, for me, and hopefully for many people listening to this and watching it, It's that we have to be intentional. We have to decide we're going to address this issue and make changes, not only in our own minds, but in the actions that we take. And then hopefully we can start to redress this balance. You mentioned earlier on, Ken, about, half the number of black households own their home versus white households, roughly. Right?
A quarter. Well, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was, a massive difference, let's face it. So there's obviously a financial element to this. This is obviously a personal finance podcast. You're a personal finance YouTuber and blogger as well. So let's just focus on that a minute. I mean, how wide is that gap, man?
Wow. Do you know what? I wrote a piece with a Metro newspaper called The Racial Debt Gap. And when we think about debt, we always think naturally that debt is debt. Debt's debt. Debt affects everybody the same way. But in actual fact, that's not true, because when you go and take a look at the net worth of the average black family versus the average white family, there are stark differences. So, and the reason for that is, so for example, on the average white family's net worth, you're more likely to see mortgage debt and maybe say, buy-to-let debt and that sort of stuff. So, investment-related debt. Mm-hmm. Whereas on the average black family's net worth, you're more likely to see high-paying interest debt, such as credit cards, payday loans, and so on. The reason for that is because of the lower incomes, and because many of those families don't own their own homes, compounded with lower incomes, they therefore then rely on debt to sponsor their lifestyles. Okay, so I think the beginning point is actually understanding that there are differences. Yeah, and everybody is at a different stage on the money journey, as it were.
Yeah,
and those differences exist by race, and we should not be afraid to talk about them. We shouldn't. Like if you go and read, say, there are reports out there. I think there's the Runnymede report. There's the Resolution Foundation. They've got their reports. You've got reports by the ONS. These are reports that actually tell you where we've got these differences. I think as people who focus on personal finance and things like that, actually highlighting those is a beginning standpoint, because it starts to make us comfortable in talking about this issue, especially when we view it from a data perspective. Okay, so talking about it is the first thing. Then I think just stories about real life stories. I mean, I'm talking as a creator of content, potentially, real life stories of people who are either going through stuff when it comes to their finances, or who've seen differences in their financial lives by taking certain steps. I think talking about stories that are not just, that are quite diverse will make a big difference in just helping to just make this a really comfortable subject area for us to focus on.
Absolutely right. What role do you think does the personal finance industry have in this? And that thing is, the problem is, I phrase that question and I realize just what a ridiculous question it is. It's too big. Who are we talking about here? We're talking about, providers, insurance companies, investment houses. Are we talking about advisors? Are we talking about banks? Or are we talking about personal finance bloggers like you and me? But what can the industry do to start to address this issue?
Wow.
Yeah, sorry, big question.
That's a huge. So, I think first of all, some of the points I mentioned before are completely relevant to this question that you just asked. I think telling stories and shedding, and because the data around these things are just tucked away in reports. Yeah. Can we make them more, more visible?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think the more visible they are, the more they'll just encourage us to ask why we've got these situations. So the industry could do a lot more by just everybody being more, I think the word you used earlier was intentional, when it comes to just almost putting these bits of data in front of everybody else, in front of the ordinary individual. Because I often wonder to myself, what does a white person think when they read a report that says that, you know, only 24% of black households actually own a home? Like I often just wonder, you know, what crosses people's minds if they come across that sort of statistic. Does it raise a question like, you know, why is that the case? You know, or does everybody, you know, are people just mute to that sort of information and carry on as normal? You know, I don't know. You know, what are your thoughts, Pete?
Yeah, certainly not mute. Injustice annoys the hell out of me, and part of my original inspiration, reason for doing Meaningful Money was because of the fairly, at that time, imminent bringing in of what was called the RDR, the Retail Distribution Review, which any idiot could see would take access to financial advice away from the vast majority of ordinary people, and it did, creating what's been termed the advice gap. It was that sort of sense of, well, that's not right. How can I address that? That was part of my original inspiration for starting this whole journey with Meaningful Money. And so when I hear a stat like that, my initial reaction was, how the hell do we fix that? And where do we even start with it? That's how I sort of phrased that sort of question to you earlier on, almost out of exasperation. Where do we start with this? But it's certainly not a sort of a head level sort of, that's interesting, because that doesn't get us anywhere, does it? It needs to be, that's not fair. What can we do about it? And I think you mentioned visibility. That, you know, we live in just a more connected world than ever of instantaneous not only 24-hour news, but by the second community reporting, thanks to Twitter and Instagram Live and all these things, which is why, you know, so many of these events have been captured in real time. The world just goes nuts. You know, how can this be? Visibility, I think, is bringing this whole question to the fore. And you're right. We need to make this stuff more visible. We need to not sort of just treat like these reports and these findings and these stats as just interesting and sort of shake our heads slightly. What a shame that is. But we need to get angry about it and start to think, what can we do to fix this? So I'm certainly not passive, mate.
No, I know completely. But I was just thinking more about this question. You know, there's almost a one size fits all situation in our society today. So pick credit, for example. Yeah, the fact that the average black household is more likely to have more debt means that when they go to borrow some take on debt for other reasons, they're more likely to face issues with their credit report or issues with their credit scores and credit files and so on. Yeah. Which then means that they're more likely to borrow money at much higher rates of interest. Yet again, it's almost like this
self-perpetuating,
perpetuating thing. So almost having that one-size-fits-all approach, I don't think works. You know, I think we need to start to look at our society from just from the lens of those various pockets. You know, could maybe the big agencies that that do these credit checks, for example, and so on, maybe have a slightly different approach to particular groups, because they understand that those groups, for example, are going through their current situations because of just by virtue of the way our society is currently structured. This is a random idea, and I know it's very difficult to implement something like that, but that's the sort of conversation that we need to start to have. If you are to have more people owning homes, the question is how do you make that easier? How do you make that more possible? How do you make borrowing easier? Because a lot of these people can't even get mortgages.
No, sure, yeah.
They rock up and the bank say no. They say no, we're not lending to you. So and then it becomes you're back to square one again. And then there's the motivational aspect of that, because if you keep getting knocked down and suppressed all the time, at some point you're
going to give up. Yeah.
Give up trying.
Yeah.
So I think giving, this is a slightly different point, point as well, giving more voices from an industry perspective. I'll just give you a random, really personal example, right? There are many Black creators like I am, out there who are doing things, But a lot of us, for example, who are, talking about these issues and giving these issues a voice, don't, for example, can't get our foot in the door with, lots of, call them, companies that we need to partner with to start to think about solutions for our communities. Yeah. So the question then is well, why is that? Why can't, certain people, I look at some of my white colleagues who are peers, and then they'd say, oh, I've got a contact, they'd name this brand and they'd name that one, they'd name that one. And it's quite easy for them because, again, we're back to this situation where people, the decision makers in companies can easily identify, I can relate to this individual, then there's this trusting that exists, So I think that there needs to be a lot more intentional effort applied in reaching out, in reaching out to people of color and saying, well, actually, look, how can we better work with your communities? What are the issues? Like, what are people at the very ground? What are the issues that people are facing? Yeah. And how can we always put a spotlight on that? And brands not being afraid to be associated with talking about these issues.
Yeah, for sure.
And not doing it for tokenism, not doing it for and saying, well, actually, we've worked with one Black man or one Black woman. So, hey, look, the box, we're okay. Yeah. We're okay. But actually saying, for example, I'm not sure if I can name the brand. I worked with a brand recently. They asked me to come and do a workshop. And I was just so impressed by their focus on true diversity, not even for just, we just want to be seen to be, talking about it, but more, this is a part of our culture that we're not being shy to talk about these issues, but we're actually wanting to help our employees. So this is an employment company. And what they wanted me to come to do was to talk about money and from my perspective as a Black man, such as their employees, who, which they have many Black employees in the recruitment sector, could better manage their money. And for me, that was a really good example of an employer really doing almost things they didn't need to do to go out of their way to make sure that their employees were better managing their finances better.
Encouraging.
Encouraging, exactly. So I just think, these are not difficult things to happen. I just think people need to be bolder. Decision makers need to be bolder, not afraid. And I always use this lukewarm terminology. A lot of people prefer to be lukewarm because they're afraid.
Safe.
They're like, oh, I'm a white man or I'm a white woman. What can I say? What can't I say? I just think people just need to be bolder and just say, well, actually, this is where I stand on this matter. I speak against this. I speak against that. I'm a decision maker. I will take some responsibility. I'll use my position properly. I will engage. I think engagement is a big part of this subject. I just think there needs to be more intentional outreach and more, more reaching out, for example, to the Black community. And even at a very basic level, how many, I'm just putting this out there, how many white people, for example, listening to this, have spent money with a Black-owned business? A Black-run business. By that I mean a business run by a Black person. Have you actually literally walked in and said, hey, I'm actually going to spend my money today with this business? Now, radical idea, but how else are these businesses meant to grow? And for people who are entrepreneurial perhaps and who are self-employed and so on, how else are their businesses meant to grow? I don't know if you've looked at the stats around the percentage of businesses run by essentially by ethnic minority people who are with 3 employees or below. Right? Most of those businesses don't really go anywhere because they don't really get the volume they need to necessary to make a business worthwhile. And part of the reason is because of this lack of trust. because I've asked my white friends that. Like, when last did you intentionally say to yourself, do you know what? I'm not going to give my money to that big online platform that we all buy things with without mentioning it. Mm-hmm. I'm actually going to go to the local high street and I'm going to find a business run by a black man or a black woman, and I'm going to buy something for £10. I challenge anyone watching this. I literally challenge you. Will you take up on my challenge of doing that? Of going out there? It might mean that you drive for 4 miles to go and find the place. But will you do it? Because this is how you reach out to other people who are outside of your immediate comfort zone. Yeah. This is actually how you go beyond hanging out around people who are exactly just like you. But you might actually get out there and meet somebody who you might ordinarily be curious about or afraid of without even knowing you are. But you reach out and you say, hello, how are you doing? What business are you running? Yeah. I'm here to buy something. And they will be shocked, by the way, to see you, but they will welcome you because it's unusual to do that.
Yeah, sure is. It's a great challenge. I was going to ask you, how can individuals, start to address this? And that's a great answer to that. I think we need more voices as well. I think I said to you on the phone at one of my meetups in the pub in London, young lady called Emma approached me. Emma, if you're listening, hi. And she was asking specifically about how to reach the LGBT community. And so, she said, hey, how can that community be reached with the message of good financial management? She had a view as to why she felt that members of that particular community as a rule, didn't handle their money very well. Obviously, it's a generalization, which is part of the problem. Yeah. But she said, how can we reach? And I said, well, look, they're not going to take that message from a white, middle-aged, straight guy. They're going to take it from one of their own, right? And I do think we need more voices, authentic voices, and conversation, which is why we're here, mate. I want to... I want there to be more of this, more conversation, not shying away from it, being bold, being almost, I don't want to use aggressive because that's not the right word, but being very deliberate about how we address this stuff. More voices, more disparate voices, more conversations, more action. It's got to come down to that. I know for me, it was, what do I do about this? And I know a lot of people are thinking that, so I hope this has helped give some thoughts. Tell me a bit about the Humble Penny, man. What was the thinking behind that, and what are your plans and aspirations for it going forward? How did it start?
Yeah, so the Humble Penny, for those that don't know, is at thehumblepenny.com. Started life as a blog, and I started that blog because, very connected to this subject matter, I had not seen anyone who looked like me talking about money in a way that people could relate to, a normal individual on the street could relate to. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we started that in December 2017 as a blog with a focus on really trying to bring my perspective as a Black millennial, somebody from the African continent who's then immigrated to the UK. I just kind of wanted to shine, a bit of light on this because, everywhere I'd looked, there were different expected versions of website.
Folks that look like me.
Yeah, and I just thought, why isn't there somebody who kind of just looks like me, who has their different life struggle? Sure. And because I know there are many people out there, we always look at things such as immigration from a very negative perspective. When in actual fact, my life journey has shown me that, there are so many people out there who've done incredible things and added incredible value. So the Humble Penny was born essentially to talk about finance, to demystify personal finance, but to bring in everybody else into the conversation. Yeah. So that, we're not shying away from the fact that I am a Black man, and I'm very comfortable saying it, and I've got a surname that barely anyone can pronounce. Really putting it out there, putting my face on the homepage so that people can go, oh, there's a Black man on a personal finance website with a name I can't even pronounce. I wonder what his life journey is about, right? Yeah. So the Humble Penny started like that. And we reach, a very diverse group of people here. Sure. Whether you're white, Asian, wherever you are, and from different parts of the world. And then the Humble Penny then progressed last summer into us beginning to reach more audiences via the YouTube platform.
Amazing.
Which has been really fantastic. It's been a really great way for us to engage with families, engage with, lots of people really who are on this money journey of, at the core for us, ultimately working towards becoming financially independent, which is something, by the way, and I haven't talked about this, when we talk about money and talk about the challenges. For me, the journey towards becoming financially independent was essentially what I think about a defense mechanism, a way for me to fight the many challenges I've been facing for many years, a way for me to have some form of control over my own finances and over my own financial destiny in many ways. Because a lot of my life so far, in this country, which has been amazing, by the way, irrespective of all the challenges, has been dependent on relying on other people.
Yeah, sure.
A lot of what we do with Humble Penny is trying to teach people this is how you can become empowered to really manage your finances, no matter what background you're from, because we'll have different challenges, irrespective of what background we're from. This is how you can become empowered to own your own family's finances, to make your own decisions, to invest your own money, to change your lifestyle, to improve your mindset, all those things, but all, to ultimately help you and your family become better at managing your money. And the Humble Pennies then, as I mentioned earlier, we then launched this, essentially another platform, sister company called Financial Joy Academy, which exists essentially as, it's a membership program that we run in addition to the Humble Penny to, again, help families on this journey towards financial independence.
Well, mate, you are crushing it. It's fantastic to see. I, for one, am very grateful for the journey you've been on, and because it's obviously shaped you into who you are today. And I'm very grateful for your influence on me, Ken. And obviously,
that means a lot.
Obviously, I wish you every success with the Humble Penny and everything you're achieving, and no doubt we will speak again. Just give us the address again where people can find out more about what you're up to.
Yeah, so head over to thehumblepenny.com for the blog, or just type The Humble Penny into YouTube, and that's where you can find our YouTube channel.
Well, thank you, mate. I'll obviously make sure there's links everywhere there should be with this, but just wanted to say thank you for your time and for your input and for your eloquence on the subject. It's been super helpful for me, and I hope for many others as well. So thank you, mate. Appreciate you joining me.
No, thank you. I just want to say finally, just if it's okay, this is a difficult subject to talk about, even for me as a black man. And I just want to thank you, Pete, for actually talking about it, for actually just giving this, the room for us to have the conversation. And I just want to encourage everyone who's watching this or listening to this to not feel uncomfortable talking about it. Let's talk about it from a positive place, a place of improvement. And we ultimately, everybody wants a community, a society where, we get on with other people. So feel free to have that dialogue. Don't sit on the fence. Don't be lukewarm in my own language. Be bold. And, you find that ultimately the outcome is a much better outcome when we're bolder and, just confront these things as we see them in our society.
Amazing. Amen, brother. Thank you. Appreciate you. Cheers.
Thank you.
Okay. What a guy. What a lovely chap he is, how articulate he is. He's massively helped me in my sort of thinking about this whole subject. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you again, Ken, for coming on, mate. I really appreciate your time. There's obviously no real way that I can summarize this massive subject of racism and what my response to it should be and all that sort of stuff in just a couple of sentences here. But suffice to say, I obviously commit to being anti-racist, not just not racist. My faith, my upbringing mean that racism of any kind is anathema to me, but I know that isn't enough. I need to be aggressive, certainly aggressive, more than just proactive in using my resources to make as much of a difference as I can. So I'll try to keep you posted as I go along, finding my way through this stuff. Hopefully I'll bring you along with me as well. So Ken, thanks again, mate. Okay, Meaningful Academy. There is a permanent coupon code now for podcast listeners. I've trailed this over the last few weeks because the podcast has done so much to help me in my career, and you guys listening and watching are so supportive of everything that I'm building here at Meaningful Money. So the discount is 25 quid off the base price of Financial Foundations. That's the first phase for if you're getting started with your personal financial journey. The Build Wealth phase, there's £75 off that. And then if you bundle the two together, which may be of interest to you, then there's an even bigger discount, £83 off that. Those amounts are give or take a few p, just because the system works on percentages rather than pounds, and it's all a bit annoying and complex. And so you need to have a coupon code for that, and that is simply PODCAST, PODCAST. Enter that in the box when you register on the site, and it will automatically apply the discount for you. Phase 3 is coming. Phase 3 is retirement planning. Appreciate your patience. People emailing me about that all the time. Had to put back the timeline for that just because of my own health issues. Nothing serious, I'm pleased to report, but just fighting off a kind of post-viral fatigue thing. I don't have an ETA yet. I'm hoping it's going to be in October, working as much as I can on it without killing myself to get it ready for you as soon as I can. But you can register your interest. Click through from the homepage that you're interested in Phase 3, retirement planning. Join the mailing list and I'll keep you posted. Everything you need to know and everything you need to do is at meaningfulacademy.com. Definitely check it out. Okay, next week I'm taking a week off in a bid to sort of go easy on myself while I continue to recover. But after that, on Wednesday, the 14th of October, I'm going to be embarking on a new season of the podcast, which I'm calling The Ultimate Guides. Okay, the idea is that each show will be an ultimate guide to a particular aspect of personal financial planning, from budgeting right up to investing in retirement and all that sort of stuff. So it should be fun. It's quite a lot to squeeze in. I think probably the episodes will be slightly longer than normal, but that's okay. So that is it, folks, though, for this week's podcast. Hope it was helpful. Any questions, comments, meaningfulmoney.tv/session393. You can ask any questions of Ken or myself there, and look forward to engaging with you there. meaningfulmoney.tv/session393. Thank you again, Ken. Thank you for listening to this important episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you in a couple of weeks' time. Cheers.